Hey guys, this is National Master Kevin Yang back at it with another video. So, you might have been like, well, that was too long for National Master Kevin Yang to be gone. But, yeah, I'll be back, right? So, I'll be hosting the Simul again this Friday, right? So, if you look on the calendar, it is June the 11th, 5 to 7. I'm open to all comers. And then next week, I'll be at a tournament again. So, no simul. So, mark that date. And then after that, I should be open to simul play again. So, those are the dates that you need to keep a hold of. And, well, if you miss me, I'm sort of back. And I wanted to show a tournament game, but it's somewhere on here. I have to find it. So why don't I show you one of my daily chess games that I've been playing? So let's go into analysis mode because it's how it looks best, because you can see that while I was playing this game, I was analyzing it, right? So part of daily chess, the good thing is that you get to look at variations on your own. So here's my game. E4, C5, knight F3, D6. So this is of course, the Najdorf, right? And here I avoid it completely. I play bishop to B5 check. And you might be like, well, don't most people play this, bam, bam, and something like this, right? You might be like, what? Why are you playing that? And the reason is because I want to experiment, right? It's important to sometimes branch out. So that's what I'm doing here. Knight D7, and here I play D4. Pawn takes D4, and now this move queen takes D4. So usually people take with a knight, but because now this knight is on D7, it can't come on to C6 anymore and attack this queen. So that's why I can take with a queen. Some of you might be wondering, well, queen A5 check, doesn't that threaten both? Well, knight to C3, and I have B4 coming, I have castles. It's working out in my favor. So, I play queen takes, A6, take, take. Well, some people, you might be like, why did you take? Right? And technically you don't have to, right? You could play bishop to E2 and roll with C4. But I took because that's what I learned, and I play C4. So this is what is called a Maroczy bind structure. You have a strong grip on the D5 square, knight F6, knight C3, G6. So black had no way to develop this way, so black is developing this way. I play castles. So at this point, if you look at the variations, I was looking at bishop G5, knight D5, putting some pressure this way. But what I found was that after castles, bishop takes F6, pawn takes F6, there might be this weakness, but black is going to counter with F5 and rook E8, right? The bishops are actually going to be quite useful. So I said no to that. I castled, and I threw in this move C5, just to really disturb the harmony of these guys. Take, take, castles, and now rook to D1. Another move I could have considered was the move E5. Probably should have. Maybe. I don't know. E5 looks pretty tasty. Knight E8, and now knight to D5, with the threat of going to E7 as possible. Bishop to G5. So all these are possible. So after e5, knight g4, h3. Bring the knight onto the side, right? And then we play rook d1. We prevent the bishop from coming to g4, and we put pressure on this guy. So that was probably better. But what happened was I played rook to d1. Played this first. Rook to c8, and now queen to b4. I'm going for that pawn. b5 now. Now, to be honest, I think a5 works here, because what's interesting is that queen takes b7, there's this move bishop to c6, and all of a sudden, white is begging the question, I'm not exactly developed, but I got a pawn, so I can go queen to a6, keep the pressure here, keep the pressure here, but after queen to c7, this pawn, well, it's looking shaky, right? And all of a sudden, white might be like, well, it might not be worth it, right? If I go queen to e2, rook to d8, I bring my bishop out. Although white might be up a pawn, there is considerable pressure on this side. So for example, if h6 happens and bishop h4, right? I could play g5 and one day get my knight up to h5, put some pressure on the c3 knight, and things could get really wobbly. But I don't know. I didn't quite evaluate it at the time. I just said, I'm going to take this guy. So b5 happened. Our friend Stupak07 acted on impulse. I played e5 because now I said, okay, if you play knight g4, I'm going to consider the move e6. Does this work? No, because of rook c4, but it was something to consider, right? I could play knight d5 still, so things are in the air. But in the game, our friend Stupak played queen to not queen to a3, rook to c4. Intermediate move, threatening the queen. I backed my queen up to a3 because even if b4 happens, I'm going to play queen to b3. Here I calculated some interesting variations, right? So here I said, okay, b4, what happens if queen takes a6? There's this move, rook to c6, right? And after rook takes c6, if queen takes, bishop takes, rook takes, pawn takes, and pawn takes, at the end of the day, there might be back rank, and white won't be very happy. So, and if queen to e2, pawn takes c3, pawn takes f6, bishop takes f6, b takes c3, I didn't see much of an advantage for me after black plays queen to c8. So, I thought queen to b3 was the better way to attack the rook, because this time there's no threat on the queen, right? There's no more rook to c6, and if rook to c6, I'm going to take on f6, and if you take, I'm going to take on g7. That is the key point. So, queen takes a6 is not the one, but queen b3 should win here, because if the knight goes, I'm just going to take the rook, and if you take my knight, I will be up in exchange. So in the game, our friend Stupak played knight g4, and immediately I said knight d5. I like this pawn, right? Maybe I want to play queen takes, maybe I want to play knight takes, and maybe I want to play bishop to g5. So king h8, interesting move. I played bishop to g5, put some more pressure. Here I calculated some more variations. Queen takes, knight takes, and bishop to e6. And this knight looking really clumsy because there's not too many places to go that are really useful. Because if knight d5, then rook d8, right? And if knight c3, well, bam, bam, and bam. And the piece development compared to these guys is much better, right? The rook is much more active. So I said, okay, well, I'm going to reject that. And if knight takes e7, b4, right? Disrupt the connection of these guys. But I can, right? I didn't know. Maybe I could play b4, or maybe black could do something else. And here, now I see the problem with knight takes e7 is there's this move queen to b6, counterattack, right? Sometimes you just gotta find the moves that produce the weirdest threats. I have to play bishop to e3, take, pawn takes, and what? Bring the bishop to g4, threatening to take and take. Well, not exactly, because the queen keeps an eye on here, but after b4, we'll see things doing pretty good for black. So, what happens now, right? I don't take on e7. I should continue the pressure, right? Even if you can take here, I'm going to take on e7. f6, I'm going to play bishop to h4. I'm going to keep the pressure. So if you ever take here, okay, knight takes. I'm going to take. Rook takes h4. And here I considered a few variations again. Queen to g3, but there might be g5, right? And then I said, okay, what about knight to b6, right? Discovering the bishop to on d7. I said, I don't know. So I went with somewhat of an obvious move, knight takes f6. I went down for the slam. It was a trade pretty much. I just got my pawn back, but now I'm putting pressure. My friend Stupak is putting counter pressure. Queen to b6, so I cannot play here because queen takes f2 and queen f1 is going to be back rank mate. So I play knight f3. b4 happens, but now queen to d3. I seize on my opportunity to play rook d8 or to take on e7, right? Or to prevent rook to e4 from guarding that pawn. So rook to f4 and now rook takes e7. So at this point, I'm already thinking I'm a little bit better, right? I got a pawn. There's no particular threat against f2 because my knight is doing a wholesome job. So rook to f8. Okay, guarding against the back. Now I bring my rook to c1. I'm involving my pieces, right? I want to get it into c7. I want to put some pressure on these guys right here. So that's what I do. Bishop to f6, rook to d7, bishop to e5. And this is a very tactical moment, right? I'm just keeping my rooks here. Bishop to e5, because if knight takes e5, there's queen takes and queen f1. So let me show that. Queen f2, queen f1, and black has just enough pieces for back rank mate. So I can't allow that, right? So what an interesting try by Stupak. I played queen e2. I said, okay, well, I'm not going to fall for your tricks here. So after bishop d6, I threaten the bishop again because I want it to, if it goes to b8, I'm going to consider playing queen to e7, right? Or I can consider playing rook to e7 and bringing my other rook in. So who knows, right? And if you play bishop to c5, like Stupak did in the game, well, queen to e5, or I could have played knight to g5 as well, I think. I don't know. Maybe. Knight to g5, it could get spicy with rook takes f2, or it could get spicy with bishop takes f2, right? So I don't know. So that's why I went for somewhat of a safe check first, because I knew that if king g8, checkmate would happen. So one of the rooks had to go back. And here I said knight to g5, because the rook is pinned now, right? So it's only these two guys in the attack. So I'm going to leave it here, but in the game, it was great. So I'll see you soon. Thank you.